Welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies that make us feel seen. My co-host today is a writer, actor, and director who is really close to my heart. Megan Rosati was one of the directors of the horror anthology Give Me an A that I had the honor of helping to produce. They came out last year. Maybe you've heard me mention it a time or two. I was intrigued when Megan said she felt seen by Ellie, the young vampire at the center of 2008's Let the Right One In. What might an American millennial filmmaker have in common with a 12-year-old Swedish vampire? Turns out quite a lot, and we will get into all of that, as well as learn a bit about Megan's next project, a genre short called The Vanity. And just to note that because today's film is in Swedish, this episode is uncharacteristically short on movie clips. Apologies to all of my Swedish listeners out there, including my wife, for not serving up so many clips in Swedish. I'm sorry. We'll do better in the future, Swedes. If you haven't seen Let the Right One In, though, or if this is a conversation that puts you in the mood to watch, it's readily available on Canopy and Hoopla, among other places. Megan Rosati, what else do the people need to know about you before we get started?
I'm a big fan of genre movies, and I'm a big advocate for social justice causes. And so most of the stuff that I do kind of incorporates both, because I think genre is one of the best ways to like slide in a tasty little message. And I like my horror to be about something, you know, like I think even like I went through a zombie movie phase, like we all do. And even, you know, the most like bloods, people eating their heads off kind of zombie movie is like about something else usually. Like,
oh yeah, the zombie is one of the great allegories of all time.
Exactly. So like I get I also have ADHD. I guess it's important to note up at the top. And so I think that like the textural layers of having multiple things going on is really delightful to my brain. It's also why I really love foreign movies, because when I'm reading subtitles, it keeps me activated, right? Like my attention can't wander because I'm like, what are they saying? How do they look like they're saying what they're saying? Oh, it seems like that's a really long line compared to like buzz off, buddy. So like what, I wonder what that means in fucking Swedish. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the kind
it becomes like it's two screen within a one screen experience.
Yes. Cause my brain always has 20 tabs open. So if you can like occupy more of those with the thing that I'm watching, then I really love it.
At what age did horror films start to get their hooks in you?
Well, you know, it's really funny because I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of scary movies growing up. So I would say probably The X-Files really did it for me. The X-Files really did it. It didn't hurt that I was a teenager and Fox Mulder was like my imprint of a hottie. I also loved that you know, Scully was a petite woman like myself, and everybody took her seriously. That was thrilling. And yeah, there's just something about like, it's a very cinematic show. I was also banned from watching that. So,
I mean, it feels like if you weren't allowed to watch horror movies, that like at some point the con would be up and your parents would be like, this is breaking the rule.
Right. So I was not allowed to watch the X-Files because my dad like watched one with me that was like about like a cult and all the teenage girls were raped and they buried their babies in the field, but it was a vast conspiracy because it was aliens. He's like, you're never watching this trash again. And I was like, oh, but Dad, it's not always like this. Sometimes there's a fungus monster, which like, you know, was not an argument he was into.
Yeah, he wasn't like, that's not winning me over, maybe.
Right. No, don't worry, there's worse. So like what I would do is I would go downstairs casually every Friday night around a little before 9, which was when it aired for me, and just be like, I'm going to go just like watch some solo TV. And because it was in the basement, I could keep the TV quiet enough that they couldn't hear what it was from the top of the stairs. And as soon as they, like, I could hear the first 4 steps, and it took like 8 for them to see the TV. So like, I created my own horror movie with like the creaking of the steps. I'd like change it. Like I had it set to like, so the remote, you used to be able to press a remote and just go right to the last channel you were watching. So
the last button that would take you to the previous fucking channel.
Exactly. Like, and so it would go to like E Entertainment, just something totally.
God, God, do kids know about this now? Or like because everything is screen time, like they will never know.
No, they will never
know. Do they
know.
know the joys of waiting for like HBO After Dark, like that kind of thing?
Exactly. Well, that's why it's wild to me that people are trying to ban books. It's like, do you know what your child has access to like every day on your phone?
Right, like banning books didn't work before there was the internet. Like the info got out. They got the book. There was mail. Like and now with the fucking information superhighway, are you serious?
Like legitimately, and even that was, like I wasn't allowed to see Jurassic Park in the theaters. I think it was like 10 or 11. I was
Was this just like, were your parents just like freaked out about you seeing things that were going to scare you? Or was this like,
yes.
Were you very religious? Like
my parents were very Catholic.
Got it.
Which,
okay.
But like that's like the foundation for all horror. Yeah. So I blame this all on them. I'm like, you have me reenact a dead man coming to life every year.
Yeah, like don't tell me I can watch The Passion Play and then tell me horror cinema's off limits. Get out of here.
Right. So I wasn't allowed to watch Jurassic Park, so I read the book instead. And this is like actually related to why I picked this movie. So like I'm this weirdo who cannot see the big movie, but has instead read 400 pages of much more graphic dinosaur on human violence with a much darker ending. Like, spoiler, when I saw Jurassic Park, I was like, wait, John Hamm lives? Not John Hamm, this, the freaking, the old guy.
Hammond.
John
Hammond.
Thank you. Yeah, John Hammond. Oh, I was so close.
Spare no expense.
Yeah, and instead he leaves on the helicopter. I was like, wait, he doesn't get like eaten to death by Compy Sagnus in like in the final minute. I did not
know that.
In the book, he's like sees it and he goes to get them and a little guy bites him, and as like he sees the helicopter, he's injected with their like paralytic bites. So he's paralyzed watching everybody leave, unable to scream for help as they like eat him alive. So that's like what I absorbed.
Shit. Wow.
Instead of like freaking Jeff Goldblum's one-liners. Like for some reason, that was too much.
Okay, so I feel like we have set the stage then for the character pick, and you've made a sumptuous choice.
Oh, yes.
Would you like to tell the folks at home what character and what movie we are gathered here to discuss today?
The movie is Let the Right One In, the original. The original one. I think it's Swedish.
It is Swedish.
Swedish. And the character that I picked was Ellie, who is the child vampire at the heart of the story.
So there are so many ways in for. Were you relating to child vampire? Were you relating to ancient being, adult, like being in a child's body? Were you related to being kept by an older male figure who is taking you through the ages? Like where was the end point with Ellie?
It's so funny. I was thinking about this last night, trying to be like, why exactly? Because when I was trying to pick a movie, I wanted to go for something that I not only loved, but that feeling seen that gave me that jolt of recognition, right? And when I saw this movie, I remember I was in my 20s. I was at the Sunset Theater Lemley, which is like now a different theater, but it used to show all like Sundance movies, all like, artsy foreign movies. And I was so tired. I remember I had like stayed up for 2 nights for some reason. I don't know. I was like, I was living life. And I sat down to watch it and I was just exhausted. And the first shot of the movie started and it's like snow falling quietly. And I was just captivated. Like I could feel my eyes wanting to close, but I was like, no, stay awake. Like this is the best thing. This is the best thing. So let's start with Ellie. So I'm going to refer to Ellie as a she, although I would say that probably you could say she or they, and probably they, but in the context of the movie and my own identification, I'm just going to refer to her as she, and like we could talk about that later, because that's a big like moment in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
She, I think it starts from, there's something about like female characters who are like 12, 13 that really get me. Because it's like the last time, like right before puberty, is the last time I remember being like fully confident and unself-conscious in myself as a person. Right? Like puberty happened and all of a sudden, like you gotta look a certain way, you gotta like do certain things. Like my body, my appearance, even my demeanor became subject to all this like scrutiny and expectation, as many women know. Like before puberty, I was a leader. After puberty, I was bossy. Before puberty, I was on the math team. After puberty, that was like dorky. You know what I mean? Like it was this like moment where I was smart and I like felt smart. I felt like I understood things, you know. I felt like I could like keep up with the news. Like my brain always felt formed, but the like outside didn't match, and it wasn't a problem until I got to that like you're supposed to be sexy kind of age.
Yeah.
So I've always been like small for my age grade demographic. So like that's part of it too. So it wasn't like, you know, I was like, oh my God, I'm like so hot and I don't know what to do with myself. Like I was hit with like glasses, braces, puberty, like right on the transition from 5th to 6th grade. So I remember showing up in this like whole new milieu, feeling like what's going on? Like, oh, we can't like talk about books and like makeup games. Like that's no longer cool. Like I have to know what lip gloss is. Like it was just such a paradigm shift for me that, and also there's something about characters that age too, where they're allowed to be, and Ellie not so much, and I'll say why, but they're allowed to be like, they're girls, they're feminine, but they're not sexualized.
Yeah.
You know, and I think like a lot of grown women characters, like how stories navigate just sexualizing them, whether or not they're sexy is like not a thing, but it's like, how does the story view them? Whenever I see a female character who is defined by like what she wants and what she does, as opposed to how people view her and like who she's romantically entangled with, it really resonates with me. Right. And I think that a lot of times, and also I was like a huge reader as a kid, as we've said. So a lot of times there's those characters like on that like pubescent cusp as girls, as feminine people, get to embody a lot of agency in a way that like once sexuality, once romance is introduced into the picture, that usually becomes the focus of the story. And I just found that really boring. So so it's something about, so it's that age too. Like there's something about it, like you like feel like you know what the world is, but the, you know, as a character, but the movie or the, you know, entertainment itself is not trying to like sexualize that character, because that's creepy. Right.
Right. If you start doing that, it becomes the plot of the movie and it's a dark plot.
Right. Like, you know, there's a whole podcast about Lolita, so we can let her have it.
Jamie Loftus did it.
I mean, she did it so hard, and it was really excellent. But so I think there's that, and then it's also like physically, I was like, oh, she kind of looks like I did at that age, like a pale, you know, big-eyed weirdo with like dark hair. Like there's something about like I like identified physically with that too. Like I said, because I was so small for so long, right? Like everybody else like had boobs and was like wearing crop tops and being sexy, and I was just like, I'm just being Miley, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, do you guys want to talk about the Chronicles of Narnia again? Like it was just not.
Right.
So there's some.
Do you want to talk about Crichton books?
Like I read all the Crichtons.
Right. Yeah.
All the John Grishams, right? And then this is the other thing too, and like this is the 200-year-old child vampire of it all. There's that, and then there's also the thing of like being older than you look and have people treat and how that affects how people treat you. And I was always such a reader that I like had too much awareness of what goes on in the world without any context. So I would understand, like, okay, for example, I read Animal Farm when I was like in 7th grade or something. And I was like, oh, gross. The people turn to pigs. Is that it? Yeah. I understood it, but I didn't get it.
Yeah.
You know, like fair. I didn't get it. And so it kind of, that sort of influenced how I related to people around me because I could see like, oh my gosh, you're going through a heartbreaking coming of age story, but like we're the same age and I should just be able to hang out. You know what I mean? Like I had this like this deep understanding that did not help me at all. In fact, it kind of like hindered and separated me from other people because I was like, oh, I can see how this influenced your development. But like, like you're in fucking seventh grade. Like, shut up. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I didn't have enough talking to people experience. And this comes around to were you kept in the box as a vampire? Like my parents were in the Navy. So I grew up traveling a lot. So I moved when, like I moved a lot before I was in school. And then I started school in New Jersey and then moved down to Florida and then moved up to Connecticut. So this is also why I was so big into reading because you could take it with you. It was like read a book by your flashlight or like stare at the window and make up a story in your brain. Like those were my options. And so the idea of like being constantly moving, like she has to move because she's a child vampire who eats her victims, is and not being in control of it. That was something I related to, feeling like displaced, feeling always like the new kid, feeling like, okay, like I don't know how they do things here. And how do I figure it out? Like, is there something from my experience I can reference? Maybe a 200-year-old puzzle.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
right. Like using like what you had to entertain yourself and then always being kind of like on the outside. And then I said the ADHD thing, that's also a part of it, right? Like feeling separated from normal experience because you know, my brain works in a different way, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny, like as more of my friends have become late diagnosed, I'm like, oh, so in adulthood, I surrounded myself with a lot of neurodivergent hotties.
It's like when people grow up and like realize that they're queer and then they realize that like everybody they were friends with in high school was too, and just nobody had the words or was able to talk about that yet.
Yes, 100%, 100%. I saw some like meme somewhere that was like, if all your friends are neurodivergent, I have some news for you. We tend to move in packs like poorly emotionally regulated wolves. I was like, oh. So I think that was another thing that made me feel like a little bit outsider looking in because things that were like easy or unconscious for other people, like I had to learn. I'm like, how do people make friends? Like, what is it like to do small talk? Like, what are they doing? How can I copy that? Like all these like little things that made me feel like I was like imitating a human to fit in. You see the metaphor? I think it really works.
I absolutely do. No, I absolutely. I'm like, I'm sitting here astounded at like damn, all of this just does make sense with what she's saying.
Right?
I was so excited to find out what the answer would be.
Yeah.
And the answer is everything, in fact. Perhaps short of the like drinking human blood. It's really close.
Listen, I have my secrets.
Yeah, I'm not here to make you expose everything.
But even like, okay, so, the drinking human blood. So like she's and also what I love about this movie is that it sticks to classic vampire rules. Like I cannot fuck with Twilight. Soundtrack, God bless. Like I've seen the first two in theaters high. Like I had a great time. You know what I mean? But like as a vampire purist, you do not sparkle in the sunlight. You burst into flames. Like this is This is my vampire lore that I stand upon. Right.
Yes. Yes.
And so what, like she doesn't feel cold or pain. She's like, she can't be seen in the daylight. She can kind of like skitter up the sides of buildings. Like there are things about her that are different that like she didn't choose.
Yeah.
And some of them can be seen as like powerful, like her ability to crawl up the side of a building, but like, great.
Yeah.
You know, you're like,
that's not like super for making friends when you're like 11.
Right. And it's also like, it doesn't make you any money really. There's no way to like harness it like clearly. So like those kind of things, like I've always been a night owl. Like if left to my devices, I would go to bed at 1 and wake up at 9 and be the happiest person in the world. But, that's not how I can live. So,
yeah. Well, I think too that like, with you saying like in sort of the intro setting this up of like preferring your horror with like that sort of additional, like the value layer, the different layer added on there. I think that I'll get back to sort of my like big overarching thesis on this movie. But for now, like I think what we have in this movie is a really interesting parallel with like you mentioned, you will refer to this character Ellie as a she, but this character is perhaps genderqueer.
Yeah.
And this is a very important movie in like the queer horror canon. And what you have in the reveal of Ellie's sort of true composition, like reality as a human being, you have her sort of showing herself, like the truth of herself to this little boy who has become her companion, and him welcoming her and him accepting her. And I think what you have with that is a really almost a one-to-one contrast with the infamous reveal at the end of the movie Sleepaway Camp from 1980, where you have the character of Angela who, at the end, like bloody and we are now aware is the perpetrator of all these like murders throughout this slasher, is actually like a boy who was raised as a girl by a violent family member. And we're sort of like, at least implicitly, through this like gender dysphoria of having to be in a different body than they were. And like, is it like vilifying of trans folks? This is like an exact opposite sentiment 20, 40 years later. And I think in that way, like a fascinating capsule of the evolution of horror and its ability to frame the monster in sort of loving terms and sympathetic terms, which, we kind of always done to a degree in this genre. But this like gives us like you don't have to read it between the lines to find tolerance for the monster. It is just put as text that Ellie can be accepted as Ellie is, as opposed to like, and then this is the worst thing you can imagine, which is a gender reveal, and it's gonna fucking scare you.
Yeah.
And I think that is such an incredible layer of this film.
I totally agree. And I was thinking about this in terms of queer representation too, because I know this is such an important movie for that. And it's I'm very confident I'm a woman. I don't have ever had the experience of gender dysphoria, but I did set, like, I remember when I was like in high school and college, which was years and years ago, before this conversation was so like, a top of mind for our culture and society. I would say like, I would like, I have the brain of a middle-aged man in my body. And it didn't mean that I wanted to be a middle-aged man or I felt like I was a middle-aged man. I wanted to be taken seriously and respected for my ideas. And I saw that happening to men regardless of their appearance. And there's something, I'm a petite woman with a certain look that makes a lot of people discount me before I even start speaking. They have an image of me that they project onto me. And so I think there's something in that I relate to as well, as like the performative nature of how you have to act to get people to listen to you given how you present, right? So yeah, when I was thinking about, should we dive into the she-they-ness of Ellie?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so this is what I so love about this movie, and you were saying how far queer representation has come. From the jump, she's like, I'm not a little girl. He's like, oh, like you're a little girl. She's like, no, I'm not. Like, she's always completely firm. She's like, I'm not. Like, I'm not. And you're like, oh, because she's a child vampire. Like, like that's how your brain processes that as a viewer, especially because
in the sense of like, well, neither is Esther the orphan. Kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. No, you're a 200-year-old vampire. And they cast such an amazing young actress in this. And they do such incredible things with the effects to sell that in a variety of ways. But so you kind of like discount it, right? You're like, yeah. But like you look like a little girl. Don't worry about it. And then there's this pivotal moment in the movie where, the character of Oscar, who's her friend / love interest, like he sees her as a love interest. She feels something for him, that's up for debate. And they're like, she's staying over his house, and she like walks out of the shower, and he like tries to sneak a peek at her. And instead of seeing a young girl's body, which would be creepy anyway, because again, this is a child, you see that Ellie has no female genitalia. And it's this really shocking moment. Because for me, I was like, I was like creeped out by myself watching it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm like, am I a creep? Like, so it made me think like, am I a creep? And then you think harder, and it's obviously an adult body double wearing prosthetics.
Yeah.
But so what you're seeing is something that just doesn't exist really in our like normal representation. And so it's like, and I remember, and it's so funny when this is one of your favorite movies and you're like, come watch this with me.
Yeah.
This is like my own I'm a vampire kind of like reveal, because I'm like, come watch this with me. So whenever I watch this with somebody, I'm anticipating this moment that is super uncomfortable for the viewer.
Right.
I'm like waiting for this other shoe to drop, right? And then I know they're going to make a judgment about me recommending this movie. And there's this like really intense moment in it. And so in a way, it's like my own like, here's my like dark secret. Like, it's not just like, oh, 2 child vampires love stories. It's like, you're going to see like a genitalia-less child. And that's going to be like an impactful moment, because you're like, okay, what is Ellie? Like, and in the book, they say that Ellie was a boy who was castrated when he became a vampire. So, but in the movie, that's diegetically not present. Pushing up my glasses. Like, that's not present in this version of the story. But I did seek it out because I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, what did I see? Really? Like, how did she get that way? Like, what happened? And then I think in the moment when I was watching it, I just kind of thought, I was like, oh, so she's definitely not I attributed it to her vampireness. Does that make sense? Yeah. But it's just long enough that it confirms Ellie's version of her identity.
Right.
You know, they're like, no, really stop. This is not a cute love story between 2 kids, like in your normal hetero way. And when I show it to people, they're like, oh, you're weird. You know what I mean? And like, that's my, like, I'm actually a 200-year-old vampire. Like, you know, like when you show somebody something with like, it's like, oh, my favorite movie is, you know, I don't know, Sallow. People like think of certain thing of you, right?
Sure, yeah. It's time for a quick break, but I will be right back with more from Megan Rosati. And then we will switch down in tone a bit for the end of the show, and one quick thing, as we remember the recently and suddenly passed writer Scott Wampler, who was a co-host of the very popular KingCast podcast and was a really formative voice in talking about, you know, all kinds of film, but particularly genre films. So stick around at the end for that.
I'm Sequoia Holmes, pop culturist and host of the Black People Love Paramore podcast. Contrary to the title, it is not a podcast about the band Paramore. Each episode, I, along with a special guest co-host, dissect one pop culture topic that mainstream media doesn't associate with Black people, but we know that we like. Tune in every Thursday to the podcast that's dedicated to helping Black people feel more seen, here on Maximum Fun.
I'm Yucky Jessica.
I'm Chuck Crudsworth.
And this is Terrible,
a podcast where we talk about things we hate that are awful.
Today we're discussing Wonderful, a podcast on the Maximum Fun Network.
Hosts Rachel and Griffin McElroy, a real-life married couple, discuss a wide range of topics: music, video games, poetry, snacks.
But I hate all that stuff.
I know you do, Yucky Jessica.
It comes out every Wednesday, the worst day of the week, wherever you download your podcasts.
For our next topic, we're talking Fiona, the baby hippo from the Cincinnati Zoo.
I hate this little hippo.
As you started pursuing creating your own characters or inhabiting character as an actor, what was the process like of coming back into the confidence that you knew before you kind of like entered the marketplace of humanity as like a post-pubescent human being. Like, where did the rebuild of the confidence come from, and how did working with story and narrative kind of go along with that?
Oh, just my life's work, Jordan. Just a casual.
Yeah. So, just a capsule on your life's work.
Yeah, I would say probably college when I was a theater major, because there was such an emphasis on authenticity of intention and reaction, right? Like, and I say now that one of my strengths as an actor is my willingness to look unattractive.
No, that's real.
No, it's totally real. And for me, like, this is another reason why I love horror, because a lot of the final girls, like, the point is to get to that place where you are like out of your mind, right? At least the classics that I grew up with, like Hellraiser or anything with a brunette with thick curly hair who's like hunted by a man.
Yeah.
Halloween, it like always ends with like them covered in blood, like missing a limb, and like fighting for their life, right? And that commitment is something that I'm like really good at. I'm really good at full commitment.
Yeah.
But I could break down a character and then find like where the falseness within me lies, and like try to move beyond that to something I connect to, and then commit to it fully, and then be really sensitive and impulsive with my response, right? So all of that stuff, and it really took me, like, I remember like a year and a half before my acting teacher looked at me and was like, that's it right there, what you did right there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wasn't even thinking about how my face was sitting.
Yeah.
I wasn't holding myself in a certain way. I was like pursuing an objective as a character and like living within the confines of her reality, but I wasn't thinking about how does my face look in this scene, or even like, how are people perceiving me right now? Because I was so deeply rooted in that character's motivation. And so that was like a watershed moment for me that really made me excited to like dive into those kind of parts. Like, anything that's sort of on the edge is fun.
And it feels too like I guess the armchair response to that would be like, it feels like this sort of draw towards, like you said, this sort of, that prepubescent, like, say, 11, 12-year-old girl being representative to you of a time where you were last able to feel a sort of unladen unself-consciousness, sort of no strings attached ability to sort of stand in before you had to do like the repair work of like, not that you're not that now, but like before you had to do the repair work on oneself to get back where you could stand with like the conviction and stuff. It feels like a pursuit of those kinds of roles and a comfort in those kinds of roles feels like a return to a time where it was like there was that sort of pure confidence and that pure ability to like just ugly it up.
Yeah.
Like that, like 11-year-old you could be like, well, of course I could do that because this, like, I want to do a good job. I want to do the best job. And other people's perceptions of you and how that would change their decisions about you would affect your actions going forward. So it feels kind of like, I don't know, it kind of feels like a part of the reclamation project.
Yeah. And I thank you for this therapy session.
In a best case scenario, that's what feeling seen is.
Yeah. Like that's the idea, right? Because I did spend many years, like really torturing myself with my imagined ideas of other people's ideas of me.
Right.
So that's like 2 layers of nonsense. Like other people.
Yeah, like not only your speculation about you, but your speculation about other people's speculation about you. That's a real burden to put on your back.
Yeah. And so like and also that partly comes from like the neurodivergence where I like truly at times did not know how I was being perceived, right? Like I'm like, oh, everybody doesn't want
going into the career that's the ultimate career of how others perceive you.
Well, because I've studied it, right? Like I was studying it for years. Every time I moved, I'd be like, how are we this way? Like, what is this? What is this hierarchy? How do these people talk to each other? Like, how do you, so there was a little bit of that, but then there's also like, oh, everybody doesn't want to listen to me monologue for half an hour about my favorite episode of The X-Files. Like, a lot of people are like, weird. Oh, yeah. So what are you doing this weekend? Like, and I just like didn't know how to exist in that, right? Or how to leave space for other people to jump in, or like I would feel myself getting really excited and like monologuing and then just like see the light in people's eyes die. Now I only do that on pitches professionally.
Well, talk about the vanity and how that sort of like continuous work throughout your career and obviously throughout your personal life, like in parallel with your career, how those considerations around those like exact themes factor into the vanity.
Yeah. So thank you. So The Vanity is a short film that my husband wrote. I also contributed to the story and that I'm going to direct and we're both going to act in. And yes, we called it The Vanity. Like we know. And it's a sci-fi horror short about a world where social media and AI have like become everything. And so one of the few ways left to make a living is by being an influencer, a social media influencer on a platform. And there's this brand new platform called The Vanity where you stream your content to a mirror. And they're like, it's great. You can leave your phone. You like have so much more freedom. You get to just, it's all in one place. And, like they're exclusive, whatever. And the more they like look at themselves streaming, the more horrific visions appear in the mirror in front of them until they start to doubt their reality, until there's a twist at the end because I'm addicted to that. But it's a movie about perception, about how who's the real you? What do you show to other people? And how does performing a version of yourself online every day affect like what you really care about in life, right? So like in the short, my character Erin is a makeup artist influencer, but she used to be a musician. And now she has to make so much, in order to make the amount of money that she needs to make, that they need to make to live, like they have bills piling up. Like we're just like regular people, she has to perform literally putting a mask of, face changing makeup on her face every day in order to like live her life. But like as the performance of herself becomes more and more, her real life becomes less and less. So
with ADHD, I would imagine you were quite practiced in literally masking in order to be assimilated effectively among the more normies of the population.
Nice, Jordan. Nice. Yeah. You got it in there. No, I mean, it's so funny. I haven't heard that term until really recently. And I was like, and I'm like, it's so ingrained in me that I don't even notice it anymore. Like it's such a practice part of who I am that it's only sometimes when I get like really excited or like a little bit drunk or something, or like around people I'm comfortable with, that I realize that I'm just like, doing my explosion thing. But yeah, and it's also, as again, like going back to gender identity as a woman, I feel like we have to present a certain way in order for people even to think, like, to take us seriously. Like there's this trend on I saw on Instagram that was like, actually no makeup, and it's a girl with no makeup. No makeup, and it's like,
yeah, no makeup,
and then it's makeup, and then makeup, right? So it's like they're like, men are like, I don't like, there's some men that are like, I don't like women with makeup, and then you show up with no makeup, they're like, oh my god, are you sick? Like, what's like,
yeah.
Are you mad at me? Are you tired? And you're like, no, you're just used to my like no makeup, which is still makeup. It's like, it's not even the red carpet. It's just like day to day. Like I can't show up to a meeting without a little bit of something on, or people will think I like don't like them, or I don't care about them. Like really, like and whether they say it or not, or whether they consciously think it or not, I know that that's going to be the perception, right? And again, maybe I'm outing myself as an elder millennial, because like there are Gen Z kids who are showing up, in tank tops and gender neutral hats and shit, and they like fucking get everything. Like God bless them. Like they are the future. I only wish. But so I think so. There's part of that too, and then the social media of it all. Like the idea that this like invisible validation from the periphery of your network is a replacement for like real life relationships is scary to me. And but the thing is I've gotten jobs. I met you by stalking you on formerly Twitter.
Right. Yeah.
So like it is a way to connect to other people who you might not necessarily come across who are like-minded. And I've taken advantage of that like fully throughout my personal life and my professional career. But what's the trade-off, right? Like, is it me crying over an Instagram post because it didn't get enough likes? Like, who the fuck cares? But like I do, right? So what I think is interesting about this project, like, I think I told you this before, but I'm always trying to avoid that Black Mirror joke, what if phones, but too much, right?
Yeah.
Like we all know. Like I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. But the addition of AI to it, the fact that there's a technology that could learn you and imitate you intimately and could be used by bad actors for nefarious purposes, like all of that really takes it to another level. Because again, I relate back to myself at my most vulnerable, which is that like 11, 12-year-old, 6th grade, 7th grade year where I was so bad at being a person in the world that I really have said this over and over again. Like if social media had existed when I was, in that stage, I don't think I would have made it out, because when I was a loser at home on Friday nights watching X-Files by myself with like maybe 2 friends, at least I didn't see everybody else having a party without me. At least I'm not comparing myself to something online that I never even had access to. Like I was blissfully, and I like knew it was happening. I wasn't stupid, but I didn't have to see it. And also once I left that social milieu and I was like home with my family and like my books and like whatever, that I didn't have to carry that presentation of myself into it, right? Like I could leave it behind. I could shut the door. Like nobody could bully me at home because they'd have to call, again, I'm old. They'd have to call a landline, say, hello, Mrs. Rosati, I'd like to speak to Megan, and then bully me. And that only happened once.
Clear it was mostly hard.
Yeah, like you really got to want it to bully me that way. But, tagging people on something or like reposting shit, like, having like a cascade of people bullying you online is like a psychic torture that I could totally empathize with, that like, young developing brains like should not be exposed to, in my opinion. Right. So, but it's a tool. So I think what's so cool about the Vanity is that we create empathy for people and characters that you normally wouldn't see empathy with in this world, like AI generated people and influencers. Like I was like, this can't be the kind of movie where you're just like waiting for them to die because they're assholes. Like that is very boring to me. So instead, these are these influencers, like, which has such a bad connotation. But everybody I know who lives that life is the hardest working motherfucker you have ever met. They are,
because their job never stops. Their job never stops.
Exactly. And and now we're all kind of pulled into that lifestyle because of, even a plumber needs to make a fucking cute TikTok to get views. Like they're like, market yourself.
I met a guy at a vet's office and he runs a turtle shelter in Los Angeles. And he brings his turtles to that vet every week. And he put us in a video talking about his little sick turtle, Timo. And he was like, find the videos, like them, subscribe. Thank you guys so much. And we expected to find this guy's handle and see like 10 followers. He had like 250,000 followers. And you know why? Because he clearly tells every single person he meets about his turtle sanctuary and that they should watch his videos. But this guy is on the grind constantly.
I know. And like, that's so crazy. Like, that's so crazy that we all have to be marketing experts for our own lives. Like, like our own life. And I'm in entertainment. So I've, we've kind of invited that, right? Aspects, like
social contract.
I'm like, again, if we're going to go to the vampire metaphor, I'm like, bite me.
Yeah.
I want to live forever.
I want to live forever.
So I think it's interesting that, like, all those influencers, they're working 24/7. Also, they're very analytically minded people. They're like, this is what performs, this is what doesn't. Here's what we got to do at 2 minutes. Like, it's metrics, metrics, metrics. And then you're constantly looking at yourself from a bird's eye perspective of how you appear, both to your community as well as like how you're performing. Right?
Yeah, you're a commodity.
You're a commodity.
You opt into the commoditization.
So there's something about like looking at yourself from the outside. And as an actor, I've had a lot of practice in that. And that's why I do other things, quite frankly, because I'm very bad at it. It makes me feel really bad. It makes me feel really bad to be like, here's what's hot about me. Like, you know, it's not why I got into it. I got into it because I like expressing things in an unselfconscious way. And I like communicating with people and I like feeling seen. Like that's my whole thing. Right. And, So, but I'm like, there's more to my value than what my body looks like. And I dare to believe that what's inside my head may be even better. Imagine.
Yeah. Going back to, let's write one in. A time-honored tradition of, like you said, queer, we talked about queer horror staple. A time-honored tradition of queer folks in horror is identifying themselves in the monster. And sometimes that means in the sense of the cast out, in the sense of the other. And sometimes that means both of those things, but also, and so I wanted to be Carrie burning the fucking school down. And I wanted to talk to you about, like, okay, a marginalized 200-year-old vampire child. Is there also the bloodlust? Is there the monster's bloodlust of like, and I want to make them fucking pay for what they did to me?
Oh, 100%. Like,
okay.
What I think is, you know, that one of my favorite scenes in all of movies is at the end of Let the Right One In, when the bullies are holding Oscar underwater and it's a close up on his face. And he's about to die. He's about to drown. They're like not going to let him up. And he's just holding his breath. And then like far away at the pool, you see feet being dragged down the pool. And then a head splash into the water. And then the hand on top of his head falls apart because it's not attached to an arm anymore. Like, it's so fucking sick. And then he lifts up and he looks and Ellie's looking him right in the eye. And it's like, she finally can use her strengths to help somebody else. And fucking show, like, she's not good at getting up in the daytime. She can't really be your girlfriend in the traditional way, but like if you are loyal, she will fucking slay your enemies. And like that is something, and it, you know, she like kills people like because she has to. And to me, I was like, what is my like blood thing? Like, it's like, for me, it's like attention, right? I'm like, please look at me. Look at me. Like, I'm crowdfunding a short film that I'm acting and directing because I'm clearly like, and you know what? If I could do anything else, Jordan, I would. I so would. It is not up to me, right? I did not choose this for myself. I am cursed with it. And the things that I'm really good at, like climbing up the walls of a building, are maybe not useful in everyday life. But what I so love about that is that she defended somebody who was getting, you know, attacked for who he was, you know. And Oscar is also not like a morally like clear character. Like, he's a complicated little budding serial killer too. But what it's these two, you know, like my like nihilistic 20s version of this. I was like, yeah, because like I'm a child vampire and I will find another victim, and like that is what my life is. And like like I remember I took an ex to see it for the second time. This was a guy I was dating at the time, and he was also blonde and also psychotic. And he was like, oh my God. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is like us. And I was like, yeah, you get it. Because like,
wow,
like we were both like, like we were both crazy. I showed it to my husband and he's like, oh yeah, this is a good movie. Like, it didn't even occur to him to like identify with the characters in this way.
Wow.
But he understood why it meant so much to me. And I was like, okay, so like you understand when I like, and really I am the vampire in our relationship because he's so easy, my husband, and everybody likes him, and he's got golden retriever energy, and he's just like, a confident, like handsome, charming white man. And like he talks to my landlord, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I'm the one, like, when our landlord raises our rent, that's like, here's a fucking email you got to send.
Yeah.
In that paradigm, like, I'm also able to unleash when it's necessary. And like, that's, that's kind of like everything I make is, my target is a bigger bully, whether it's like, the patriarchy or like AI taking us over, or the patriarchy having AI take us over. Like, it's all tied up in there. And I feel like those are targets that really need to be slayed. And I don't, I don't care what they think of me, because I know that I'm powerful in ways they don't expect.
That is the perfect note to go out on. Megan, thank you so much for coming on the show. And we will let people know how and where they can donate to the Vanity to help you and your art. But thank you so much for coming on and talking about this seminal film today.
Thank you. It's my favorite movie. And I appreciate you holding space for me to draw this metaphor.
Thank you so much again to Megan Rosati for coming on. The Vanity is being crowdfunded through Seed and Spark, and the deadline to contribute is June 14, so you still have time. And that is coming right up, but you have a minute, so get in there, Seed and Spark. We will put all the links you need in the show notes so you can go check it out and support the project. If you feel moved to do so, I hope you do. And now that one quick thing before I go. Last week before the release of this episode, very suddenly, the writer Scott Wampler, who he is one half of the King cast, which draws so many writers and filmmakers to come on and talk about their Stephen King, their love for him, their love for his stories, his films, his books, etc. He passed away. It came out of nowhere. I have never met Scott Wampler in person, but I, like so many on film Twitter, such as it still exists now, particularly as it existed in its most thriving sort of previous pre-Elon, pre-destroying the app iteration. He was one of the most hugely impactful voices in how we talk about film now, particularly how we had talked about it in that swirling scrum that was the heydays of film Twitter. Scott, of course, he hosted the Kingcast, as I said, but he had been around a lot longer before that. He was a writer for Birth, Movies, Death. He was Austin-based, a big part of the Austin film scene, Austin genre scene, and lately he had been a contributor and editor for Fangoria, which also hosts the Kingcast. And it was a strange, sad day of seeing suddenly, I don't think I had seen a unifying event happen on my timeline that's just so much more fractured than it used to be. The algorithms changed. Such a unifying event as the death of Scott Wampler, and to see so many people talking about knowing someone's voice, even if they never knew the person, and how they had, before they even knew it, had become sort of reliant on that voice in their lives. I think it's just his passing completely out of the blue is a worthy moment to recognize how influential this person was. Guillermo del Toro tweeting about not being able to believe that Scott's gone. Mike Flanagan tweeting about not being able to believe that Scott's gone. We have these headline people, these headline movie individuals, all, the famous ones that everybody knows. But sometimes there are folks out there who are a part of kind of that media working class, that movie talk working class, who change people's lives by virtue of their passion and their commitment, and the strength of their voice. And the strength of Scott Wampler's voice was so pervasive that I saw more than a few writers reflect on. They felt like so many people in the space of talking about genre movies and being, again, part of that film Twitter category, just were doing their best Wampler impression with their tweets. And, it's funny to invoke tweets as like this hallowed text, but it kind of is, like, especially as that app has changed and the amount of people on it and the way that they talk to each other because of the sort of flight to other locations, because it's a broken down ramshackle husk of what it used to be. That era of such a thriving conversation, that particular medium, has been over for a minute now. And the ones of us still hanging on, I think we stay because we miss that and we hope to maintain some semblance of it. But it manages to feel kind of symbolically like Scott passing is kind of a final goodbye to what that was. And so here's to Scott Wampler. And hopefully the people that loved him so much are taking care of each other. Here's to all of us, and that we may continue to take care of each other. You never know who is hanging on to your voice as perhaps a light in the dark or an anchor to something that they love when they're looking for a person out there on the infinite expanse to share an experience with them. It's possible we all mean something to each other here. So, let's just take that seriously and be kind about it. And that is our show. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or you can send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm JorCrew on Twitter, JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported directly by you.